there's just so much heartbreak in it. And I don't think it's talked about enough. I think a lot of times in today's society, we talk about just cutting people off and then just having to be tough about it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of grief behind losing a friend.
No, it's never been the right time. Like we're holding back the storyline. And I'm waiting at the end of the night, thinking of you.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Call Your Mom podcast. We are so excited you are here because today is kind of a hot topic. A few of you guys have totally connected with us and let us know that, yeah, I want to hear more about that. So we're talking about friendship breakups. And if you've had a friend at any time since kindergarten, you've probably experienced this. And just so you know, the next couple episodes is going to be about friendships. So you're going to want to stick around because we have a lot of topics around this that we are going to touch base. But today we're talking about the saddest one of them all, and is when you officially break up with your friend.
Oh, that is sad.
It is. However, it's a part of life and it happens and it needs to be talked about. But first, we're going to jump into a little bit of like what's going on in Sierra and Holly's life. So, Mom, what's going on? What do we have coming up and all this fun stuff?
Well, first of all, we have a new set, which I really am happy about because I love the swivel chairs.
I know. The chairs are so fun.
It just makes me happy.
Yeah.
We are getting ready for some country concerts coming up. So I'm very excited about that.
Yep. We went boot shopping.
Oh my gosh. We went boot shopping for 2 hours and got boot educated.
Yes. The lady broke down exactly what it takes to have your boots break in, what they should look like, how they are. It was amazing.
Yes. And that was worth the whole time, like the time we spent doing that. So we're getting ready to do that. I'm currently reading a new book that I love called The Paris Apartment, and I'm happy you're home.
I know. I'm back from Florida. Spring training was amazing. I loved it. However, I did get eaten alive by bugs. That's a story for another day. But Johnny did get his orders. We're going to be in AA in New Hampshire. So we're very excited. We think this year is going to be big. So we're excited to see what comes. But we're going to be hanging out there probably around May. So if you have any recommendations for Boston, we would love it.
Yeah, we're going to take a trip to Boston because it's like 45 minutes away from where you're going to be.
Yeah, like about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you have any recs, DM us. Restaurants, please. We are foodies, big time. Mm-hmm. So I'm super excited about that. Never been. We are, so excited.
I'm so excited. I'm going to have to go to a baseball game, even though I go to my husband's baseball games.
I think that's just obligatory. Like you have to go to a Red Sox game when you're in Boston.
Right? It's just like part of the experience. And it'll be May. It's like perfect timing.
Yeah.
It won't be too hot and stuff like that. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just going to jump right in and talk about friendship breakups, what it is, how bad it hurts, and what we think it takes to get through it and walk through it.
Yeah.
So the first thing when it comes to friendship breakups that you think of is like, how do you get to that? Like what does it take to get to friendship breakups? And like, what are those red flags that it takes leading up to that to then be like, I need to break up with my friend, or my friend breaks up with me? Like, what are those?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I would say is negativity. I think sometimes, it gets to a point in a friendship where maybe somebody is just, either one of you is just negative, but like you feel that negative energy. Like when you are supposed to hang out with them, you don't want to, you kind of are hesitant, but then after you hang out with them, you leave feeling negative. You don't feel uplifted and positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know it's almost like you're drained.
Yes.
And I think there's people like that in our lives where you need to pay attention, because sometimes we pour more into those people. And like, if you think about it, you can like write a list of people and put like a little heart around people who like, these people light me up. Right. And then the people that, you leave and you feel drained.
Yeah.
And that's important to pay attention to, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially because it often feels like it's one-sided, which is another red flag. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in friendships, it feels like it's one-sided. They are only talking about themselves. They never ask about you, or they are always discussing their problems. And you're like, wait, but I also have problems. And there is time and place. Some things are bigger than other in a friendship. So you need to be there for your friend, obviously. However, if it's always that way and it's always on their time and you have to always reach out to them, then that's kind of a red flag and maybe you need to like pay attention.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that those are, I call them energy vampires. I think when you hang out with somebody and they are constantly taking and not ever giving, I think that sometimes that can be a red flag and maybe a time where you learn to just kind of step away, and that can cause a friendship breakup.
I know, and it's sad.
Yeah. So I don't know. What are some other ones that you think about when you think of friendships?
Well, a big one would just be betrayal.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like when someone backstabs you, you know, or talks negative behind your back, or something else happens, right? That is one of them, is betrayal.
Yeah. I think a form of betrayal can also be like withholding information from somebody that's important that they need to know about. Or I think that another form of betrayal is actually kind of it's not betrayal, but it kind of is like being jealous of the person, because you're kind of just betraying your friendship with that person. And so you have to be careful of having frenemies, which those are the people that pretend they're your friends, but you know, deep down, they're not really truly happy for you, you know?
Yep.
And so
that's a big one.
Yeah.
And honestly, that leads to jealousy. People who are jealous.
Yep.
People who like see things, or they're not truly excited for you, or like hyped for you when you get something happy, like you were kind of saying.
Yeah.
So that's another big one, is like jealousy. And you can kind of see that when, like, let's say you got a new car, you could see like, oh, the person's very excited, or they're like, oh, did you know, that's okay. Like I got this, you know, or whatever it may be.
Totally. And I honestly, I've also heard that there are times where people don't know why a friendship broke up. The person is just left, one side of the party is left just completely blindsided.
Yep.
And I've totally heard of that side too, where they felt there wasn't red flags, but all of a sudden it was just, they were cut off and they had no idea why. And with all these things, there's just so much heartbreak in it. And I don't think it's talked about enough. I think a lot of times in today's society, we talk about just cutting people off and then just having to be tough about it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of grief behind losing a friend.
Yes.
And it hurts just as deeply as losing a romantic partner, I believe, because you are sharing intimacy with that person. You're being vulnerable. You're making memories. You're creating life with that person. And I think that a lot of times we don't take time to acknowledge the pain that comes with losing a friend.
I'm so glad you brought up vulnerability, because vulnerability in a relationship is so important. And I think my generation gets lost in not being vulnerable, because our key term here is don't girl boss too hard. But what we do is we girl boss too hard.
Yeah.
And we end up not being vulnerable in our friendships. And then you're like, where are all my friends? And you don't know if you're having a friendship breakup, or if you're just in a rough patch.
Yeah.
Right. And then like you're sitting there and you're like, how do I tell the difference between a rough patch and like a full breakup with a friend? How would you tell that?
Wow. Well, I think that sometimes, you know, when you hit a rough patch with a friend, I think that you could tell the difference by the way you feel, and also by their response. I think sometimes, you know, you can reach out to the person and try to have a conversation. I think that's super important. Communication, like you said, vulnerability. And I think it's so important for us to reach out and communicate and talk about, you know, hey, I was just wondering, is everything okay with you? I just want to make sure. I really haven't heard from you, whatever it may be. But making that effort, I think a lot of times is super helpful. I think a lot of times we're afraid to do that because we're afraid of the response.
Yeah.
And like you said, we're afraid to be vulnerable. But most of the times it's probably nothing.
Yes.
And people are just peopling and they're just living their lives. Or maybe they actually do feel legitimately some kind of way towards you, or something happened between you two and you just didn't realize it. Or they're just really stressed out and living their lives, and they didn't even notice there was space or a rough patch between you two. And so unless you ask, how can you know?
Yeah, I was going to say with my friendships, 90% of the time, it's just they're so busy.
Yeah.
Like I would say I'll not hear from friends for like a couple weeks. And it's just because they're so busy or stressed out themselves that they're like, don't have time to like say hi or be vulnerable or be that. And I just had a conversation with a friend the other day, actually, about taking the time to just call your friend for 20 minutes and how she was like, I was just reading a book about how there's studies that say just a 20-minute conversation with a friend can just boost your mood. And so that is true. And it was also talking about being vulnerable in your friendship. So it is true. Like it does take a little bit of vulnerability to have your friendships and to do that. And when it feels like a rough patch, it's okay to just open up your heart a little bit and be the first one to offer that olive branch.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, and it may not even be an olive branch. It just may be like, I was busy and tired.
Yeah. There may have been nothing wrong and it has nothing to do with you. And so sometimes we have to take a step back and remember that it's not always about us.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, but we get in our feels, we get in our head. And so then we think, what did I do or what happened, you know, and we want to, you know, figure that out.
Okay, so what if we got to break up with them?
Okay.
And we want to be the Grace Kelly of the breakup. We want to do it with sass and class.
Yeah, we do.
Not always sass, but really just classy and just like,
love.
hey, this isn't a space. And honest, this isn't a right time for you to be in my life right now, right? And it could look different. It could be something bad happening. It could be just drifting apart, but we want to do it classy.
Yeah.
So let's start with why do friendship breakups hurt so much? Let's start there.
Yeah. Oh man, no one warned you either. You don't really, again, we read all these books about breakups with boyfriends and, you know, with their romantic partner, and it's just so hard, but no one really talks about the devastating feelings of losing a good friend. And I just think it hurts really bad because, you know, you do life with this person, you share your secrets, you go make memories, you guys laugh, you do everything together, you're each other's hype girls, and then all of a sudden it's gone.
I know, and it sucks.
And it just feels like the rug is pulled out from under you and you're flat on your back looking at the sky going, what happened?
What happened to my friend?
Yeah.
I know. And when something does happen, I know naturally it depends on if you're drifting apart or if you need to have a conversation, but I know we've had conversations about what does that look like and how do I determine whether or not I should just let it drift or actually say, hey, you know, I need to confront this person and have a conversation with them. In your experience, what has been like the key indicator in figuring out what that is? Like what the right thing is?
So I think sometimes when we talk about like friendship breakups versus like drifting, right? So drifting can be different. Like I think sometimes that can be an open door left open for the person, for you guys to reunite. So sometimes that's not necessarily a breakup, but I think if you're doing a hard breakup and you just know that you cannot be friends with that person, it just depends on the friendship. I think some people you can have a conversation with, and I think it's really important. And I think other people you can just allow it to fizzle because you can tell that they're drifting away anyways and just be okay with that. So,
yeah, I know it depends on the situation and the person.
Yeah.
Me. So situation, maybe it's something morally that I am like, look, I got to talk to you about this. I do not agree with it. I can't stand by you and be my friend and morally watch you do that.
Yeah.
And I am like the obligated honest friend out of my friend group.
Yeah.
So my friends are like, you're the one that's going to say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I do it, guys.
Yeah.
I do it. Another one for me with like, I would need to have a conversation was again, is something if backstabbing happening to me, I would want to know why. Like I would want like an honest conversation as to why, like, why is that happening?
Yeah. So with those two examples, just those alone, have you had a friendship breakup from any of those? Like or is there a different circumstance around that? Do you have a story?
No, what I was going to say is the next one would be like when you're drifting, a lot of my friendships just drift. And I was going to say some of those circumstances would be like people just kind of naturally drifting away from me, or like if something with jealousy happens, or I've seen, like, I have a story of that, or when someone is walking through something and I disagree with it, but I have spoken my piece and it's still not really working out, I just kind of drift away. But one specifically with just letting it kind of fizzle out, not like actual breaking up, would be people talking behind my back. So thinking like I was in a solid friendship group, and then people just gossiping nasty about me and saying things that were completely not true or about who I am, and kind of making assumptions about me rather than actually just getting to know me. And in that case, I was like, hard line drawn. I'm not going to hang out with you. Like, we're no longer friends. And I didn't have to physically say that, nor was I going to go talk to them and figure that out.
Yeah.
So it really, like I said, depends on the situation or person.
Yeah.
Like if it was like my friend Shannon, for example, I've known her forever and something happened, I would really want to talk to her because I've just known her for so long.
Yeah.
So I really, for me, it like depends on that. And that's kind of how I could show an example is like, or if it was something morally wrong, like I don't really have any friendships that have broken up because someone did something morally wrong, but you do. You have a friendship breakup.
Yeah. So I had a friend who started dating someone and knew that they were a pedophile.
Yeah.
They knew that.
Yeah.
But didn't relay that information to me or to anybody around me that I knew of our friends. And so when she started dating, I'm like the person that if you start dating someone, I'm like the FBI. I'm going to find out who they are. I'm going to make sure that they're a good person because I want my friends and my loved ones treated right.
Yes.
So when she told me about this guy, I was a little like, she didn't really share a lot of information and we were really close. And I thought, that's strange. Usually she shares a lot of information about this person. So anyways, fast forward, I end up, searching, being the FBI, and I find out this guy has a record. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, he is a pedophile. He is on the Megan's Law list for like life. And so I go to have a conversation with her about it. And she's like, oh, I already knew. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you don't know what he actually did. And she's like, it's okay. He told me. And I was so upset because I'm like, you can't just believe somebody like that and just not actually go get the records and find out what the actual truth is.
Yeah. Especially
Also,
with something so like
traumatic
and wrong and
yes. And dangerous for, other people's kids. And you know what I mean? That's information that I just feel you really need to disclose to somebody.
Yes.
And so her and I just kind of got into an argument about it because I just told her, hey, you can do whatever you want, but I don't want him in my home. I don't want him to know where I live, and I'm probably not going to ever feel super comfortable being around him. And so she got really upset. We ended up in a big kind of yelling match at the end and it wasn't pretty. But then I ended up kind of apologizing, trying to make amends just because this was a very close friend of mine. And I still held my boundaries, but I was like, you know what? Let's try to mend this, And that just didn't work. And it just was awkward after that.
Yeah.
And I just felt differently about her because I felt like if you aren't going to tell me this information that is so important and imperative to, people's safety, I feel like, what else, I don't know. We just don't align anymore.
Yeah.
And I felt like the friendship was over and it was really hard and I grieved and it took me, a little bit, but, got over
and it was morally not okay with you.
Yeah.
Like she was making a decision of keeping this information from people who had children or who were pregnant and not telling them. And that was like for you morally wrong.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree. And I believe that is a reason to break up with your friend. If you feel like they're doing something like morally that is kind of going to hurt you or others, there is a line to be drawn and something that you need to speak up in that point. Mm-hmm. Because people are people. We all make decisions and choices. And it's so important to make sure that we also stand the ground for ourselves and our values and what we believe in and how we protect others.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, after we stopped talking and after, you know, our friendship, you know, it wasn't that we had a finalized conversation like, oh, we're not going to be friends anymore. We actually just fizzled out.
Yeah.
We both kind of separated and just didn't talk anymore.
Yeah.
And it was I feel like a mutual understanding of, you know,
This is out.
It's over.
Yes. Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
You know, but it didn't change the amount of grief that I felt. And I was so sad and I was so hurt, you know, and you miss that person. You miss doing things with them. You miss calling them and talking to them. But at the end of the day, eventually that wound will heal. And I truly have learned and believe over the years that when one person walks out of your life, two more will walk in. And I have so many beautiful friendships. And not only have I reconnected with like old friendships and the current friendships I have, but now I have new friends.
Yeah.
And so I just believe that, you know, sometimes you have to let go of something in order for other things to come into your life.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this episode gave you something to think about, inspired you, or made you feel a little less alone. We hope you share this with a family member or a friend because they definitely need it too.
And if you like what you heard, don't forget to follow and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen.
Let's get social. You can follow us on Instagram at callyourmom_podcast, on Facebook at callyourmompodcast, and on YouTube at Call Your Mom Podcast.
And if you're needing a little extra advice, you can always text MOM, M-O-M, to 833-569-4378. Follow the prompts, answer the questions, and then spill the tea.
And we might be answering your tea on next week's episode, so you're going to want to check it out. And remember, when life gets messy, overwhelming, or just straight up confusing, you can always
Call your mom.